Welcome to the Inner Revival podcast, because revival starts with you. As we allow God to heal, restore, transform us, and renew us from the inside out. We say, Lord, have your way in us. Let your kingdom come. Let your will be done in us on earth as it is in heaven. Welcome back to this next episode of the Inner Revival podcast. This is your host, Monika Kirkland, and I am so glad that you are here. We are entering into our third month of doing the podcast episodes, and I just want to thank you for tuning in, for sharing with friends, and for supporting the podcast. I really pray that it has been an encouragement in your life and that it has helped you in your walk with Jesus and cultivating intimacy with Him. That is my heart, and so I just thank you for being here. So today I want to talk a little bit about our adoption story with our son and just that miracle working power of Jesus. November was actually, I think, National Adoption Month. And so I had wanted to share this story. I didn't get it together in time to do it in November, but it's still a powerful story that I want to share with you today. So as many of you know, we have been in this process of adopting our youngest, our boy, several years ago when we only had our two oldest daughters, Evely and Cora. I remember Ryan and we were laying in bed one night talking, and suddenly out of nowhere, I just feel the voice of God impress upon my spirit that we were going to have a son named Isaiah. I remember turning to Ryan and telling him what I had heard. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like the Lord has just whispered to my heart that we are going to have a son someday. His name's going to be Isaiah. And I remember Ryan looking at me like, no. And he sort of just laughed at me. He was like, no, we're not going to name our son Isaiah. We already have our boy name picked out. If we have a boy, we're going to name him Rowan James. And we had this whole plan if our next child was a boy. But I remember hearing it so clearly, and I really believed what I heard. So much so that when I got pregnant a few months later, I was convinced it would be a boy and that I just needed to somehow get Ryan on board with naming him Isaiah. But then, lo and behold, it was yet another girl, our sweet little Indy Rose. After that, we felt like, honestly, that we were maybe done having kids. Even though we loved our babies, I had really hard pregnancies, a lot of nausea and sickness throughout my pregnancies, and I had C-sections, and the doctors had said that really I shouldn't have any more. But I just couldn't shake that feeling inside that we would have one more because of that word that I had heard. But to be honest, I kind of just started shaking it off, thinking, well, maybe I just heard wrong. Maybe it was just, my own desire to have a boy someday. Well, a few years went by, and at the time, my sister Maya had given birth to my nephew Julian in Pennsylvania. We had never met him. My sister had been battling a decades-long fight with addiction. She, at the time, had overdosed numerous times, and we had previously lost my brother Brendan to a heroin overdose. And so we had this fear. We knew if she doesn't get help, she will be next. It's only a matter of time. And so we were always open to the idea, and we're praying through what it would look like for us to take in Julian, wanting to make sure that it's what God was leading us to. After really praying through it and having 3 young children at home, we just decided to move forward in faith and just ask God to just confirm this decision. So we began to step out, and as we did, we got a copy of his birth certificate that his middle name was Isaiah. I had no idea. We had never met him before. We had never heard or seen his full name. And after hearing that his middle name was Isaiah, it was just this amazing confirmation from God that this was the son that he had spoken to me about all those years before. I told Ryan, and he couldn't believe it. We just began weeping like, what? No way. My family is not one to pick biblical names for their children. My sister wasn't a believer. It was just, we just couldn't believe that his middle name was Isaiah. And it just became this confirmation that yes, the Lord has called us to do this, and he will empower us and equip us with what we need to raise this child. And it was a reminder of God's goodness, of his faithfulness. A reminder that before he formed us in our womb, he knew us. See, he had given me that word years before I had even had my third daughter, years before Isaiah was even born. It was a reminder that he cares deeply for his children and that he has a plan and a purpose for each of our lives. And one of the best, most amazing parts of this story is this, that my sister got set free. After years and years of drug abuse, of overdoses, of in and out of jail and rehab, she had a radical encounter with the Lord and was set free. She got clean, she gave her life to Christ, and she was baptized earlier this year. She is a completely new person, and it still just blows me away and can bring me to tears when I think about it. It is a beautiful example of what it is to just die to your old self and to be alive in Christ, to be a new creation. She is completely transformed, a completely different person today. Recently I had asked her what advice she would have for anyone who is wanting to get clean, to get sober. And she said this. She said, have someone pray for you because you can't do it on your own. There's no chance in this world that I did this. It was supernatural. See, this is revival. This is inner revival. It is miracle working power. It is chains breaking. It is captives being set free and the prodigals returning home. So she said to me once that she feels like she got a get out of jail free card because she was enslaved and she was in prison to her addiction, but Jesus has set her free. That is the transformative power of the gospel. That is the good news. That is people who were once dead in their sin being brought back to life, being alive in Christ. And see, I have my sister again. And now our sweet Isaiah, he gets to grow up with two moms who love him dearly, both his biological mother and me, his adoptive mom. And this story is one that is still being written. But I can't help but just be moved as I think about the evidence of God's goodness and faithfulness throughout each step of this journey, throughout this entire story. Because I remember so many just tender and raw moments before God, crying out for my sister, asking God to spare her life, asking him to do what only he could do. And so this revival that has taken place in her life is just evidence that God hears our prayers. Not that it's us, that it's our prayers that set her free. No, it is only the Lord and his miracle working power. We could take zero credit for it. It is Jesus and his grace and his mercy and love for his daughter. Because as I cried out for her, he reminded me that he loved her even more than I did. And see, there were times where I didn't know what to pray. I didn't even know how to pray. It felt so hopeless. And so I just surrendered to God and I prayed, Lord, I just ask for whatever your best outcome is in this scenario. And now I can honestly say that I am living it. I have my sister back, and I have my son, and our son has us both. And so today, I really want this to just encourage you and to inspire you today that maybe it's you yourself that you feel like you have been stuck or you have been in bondage in a certain area of your life and you're praying for freedom. I want you to know that I just pray that for you and with you and believe for that. Or maybe it's someone that you know, like my sister, who has wandered far from God and all hope seems so lost. But I want you to know that we serve a God who is still working miracles. He is our rescuer, he is our redeemer, and no one is too far gone. That he loves those lost people more than we ever could. And so we get to pray for his rescue and redemption over their life. Trust him, pray, intercede, and surrender the story to him. I promise he could write it better than we ever could. I pray that you would keep hope alive, that you would keep faith alive, and that you would know that nothing is impossible with Christ. So God bless you. May you be reminded today and every day of his faithfulness and his goodness in your life and in the lives of people that you love. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Inner Revival. If this encouraged you, would you share it with a friend, share it to your social media and help spread the word? You could also rate and review the podcast, which also helps people to find us. So thank you so much for tuning in and have a great rest of your week.